This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the place to go for all of your website needs. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and I will just cut to the chase. First, Fujifilm's just announced $1,700 X-T5 is an exciting camera for a lot of people. If the X-H2S is the company's flagship video-centric XF camera with wildlife and sporting ambitions, ergo the S for speed, the X-H2, the company's flagship, call it balanced hybrid-centric XF camera, then the X-T5 is intended to be absolutely the company's flagship general-purpose photocentric XF camera, and a bargain at that. From the new 40-megapixel sensor and 5th-generation X processor of the X-H2, which allow photographers to substitute resolution for more and longer glass, my kind of jam, to the improved autofocus and IBIS necessary, I think, to extract the best image from every single one of those 40 megapixels, which is how I roll as well. Also found in the X-H2, and the dedicated physical controls for the exposure triangle, yay, and the 3-axis tilty, not flippy screen of the X-T3 that photographers prefer, me too for photography now anyway, the best battery life and EVF optics, if not electronics, of any XF camera ever, the newly less fiddly secondary controls, in a package smaller and lighter than the X-T4, for the same price as the X-T4, $200 less than the X-H2 and $800 less than the X-H2S, the X-T5 is a seductive package, a seductive promise. That it is also capable of shooting 10-bit 422 6K video, not the 8K possible with the X-H2, in F-Log, ProRes RAW, and Blackmagic RAW via an external recorder, connected through a micro HDMI port, by the way, only reinforces two things, I think. One, how far the entire industry has come since 2017, and two, the notion that the X-T5 is primarily a photographer's camera. Perhaps, one might argue, burdened with video overhead the photographer may not yet realize he or she neither wants nor needs. Call it specs for specs' sake. Easier to leave it in than to take it out, but with the side effect of more menus to slog through, more menu options, and, if enticed to go down that video path, more processing power and storage required for post, the addition of audio equipment and lighting equipment, all to the detriment of the user experience. Second, the good news is that my overriding impression of the X-T5, once in hand and out on the street with glass attached, was that it is much smaller and lighter than the full-frame cameras, certainly, that are Claudia's and my daily staples, Nikon Z7 II, Leica SL2 and M11 for our street work, Sony A7 IV for video, notably smaller and lighter than the X-T4 and X-H2 as well. I was shocked, in a good way. I really like the idea of traveling this light and unobtrusively. Third, the little $600 30 f2.8 macro I first attached to it especially made for a compellingly small, sharp, and tasty package. Fourth, of course, the colors and simulations were lovely as always. But fifth, and this is the kicker, I only had the camera for about an hour, and once I uploaded the few images I'd taken to Lightroom, I found that too many of the ones I shot with the 56.1.2 version 2 suffered from less than perfect autofocus. I'm not talking about depth of field. I was simply not able to extract the performance I expected out of the camera on a consistent basis. Now, I've never had this problem with a Fujifilm camera or lens before. I know the manual of arms. I know what the original 56 1.2 can do. I know what the X-T4 and the X-H2 can do as well. I know all are capable of spectacular imagery, most relevantly this, taken 1.03 miles away as the crow flies across the river from the Chrysler building with an X-H2 and the XF 150-600 f5.62 f8. Anyway, I don't know if the lens had an issue, the camera had an issue, or I had the issue. It was probably me. I do not recall whether or not the X-T5 I had in hand was a pre-production unit. I don't know if the 56 1.2 Mark II had been abused. But frankly, I'd just come off back-to-back workshops and a 2-day industry event the day before, running up a sleep deficit along the way, my app told me. So I'm not going to drill into the images, nor will I draw hard conclusions. One further wrinkle. Pre-production or not, I know I made a very basic mistake. I assumed I was being handed a factory default set camera, and this turned out not to be the case. I was looking at the images in Lightroom on the 32-inch monitor behind me here in the Batcave and began to wonder why these images weren't as I'd expected, when I suddenly noticed another photographer's name coming up as the copyright holder of my images. In the heat of the moment, and itching to get out onto the street, I hadn't checked on the many settings one can change to suit one's taste. I probably should have. So, lesson to self, always reset a test camera to factory defaults before using it. Then again, maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. Maybe that photographer changed nothing but the copyright, or there is something else going on. By the time I realized what had happened, the camera had been out of my hands for a couple of days, so I couldn't tell you what the impact of those settings may have been. And as I said, I was pretty loopy. So for now, I'll recap this way. I think a lot of people have been waiting for the X-T5. Makes sense to me. I just didn't have the time to wring it out. But it is also the case that A, the market has moved dramatically since Canon, Nikon, and Panasonic piled into the full-frame space. And Sony hasn't stood still. Quite the opposite. They continue to push the envelope. Hard. We need look no further than the camera Sony announced last week, the A7R5, the first camera I know of with a dedicated artificial intelligence focus chip, a fundamental architectural change set to rewrite our expectations. Even before the A7R5, however, it was clear that while full-frame systems are heavier and more expensive than smaller sensored cameras, the size, weight, and price gaps between full-frame and APS-C systems, Micro Four Thirds systems, are continuing to narrow. And in aggregate, full-frame systems are continuing to evolve faster, ever more performant at the margin than smaller sensored cameras. This is most apparent when it comes to autofocus, dynamic range, and low-light performance. As well as lens performance. I'm talking optical and mechanical, and lens choice, breadth and depth, price and performance. I know that in our street work, Claudia and I are relying more and more heavily on precisely these advantages. A question then arises. To what extent do you or I invest with an upgrade path in mind? Will, say, a 60 megapixel APS-C sensor arrive in a relevant time frame for you? Do you care about more resolution? Are you sanguine when or if that need for resolution arises to sell off everything in your XF kit, bodies and lenses, because you can't take them with you when you move to something like the fabulous digital medium format GFX 100S? And even if you are, how far will full-frame sensors have evolved by then? Will full-frame sensors have reached 100 megapixels? More? Will it get close enough with 80 or 90? Will you still be sanguine if they do? There are other questions to ask, but you get the idea. B, In the near term, I simply need to spend more time with the X-T5. Its autofocus, IBIS, and dynamic range remain open issues for me, both relative to the capabilities implied by the specs and relative to the full-frame systems I just mentioned. C. With all of this said, and this is both a more general and quite specific point, which you may not have seen coming, over time, I've become less forgiving of the industry's current state of user interface design. I'm talking software. Fujifilm is not immune from this critique. All of Fujifilm's XF cameras have become sufficiently capable and complex, while their basic menu structure, touch interface, and approach generally have remained essentially unchanged, that I'm beginning to feel their menu system and touch interface need a major overhaul every bit as much as Sony's do. Sony's attempts at making them better notwithstanding. And while all of the camera companies have dithered over investing to develop software user interface competencies, Apple continues to wipe the floor with them. That whole ecosystem does, and reset the expectations for younger generations. I just don't see this working for traditional companies very much longer. Finally, D. I'm thinking, for street photographers in particular, the most exciting camera model in Fujifilm's XF lineup for this new sensor-processor combo will be the X Pro series, even a high-end XE series rather than either the XT or XH. If Fujifilm can finally squeeze in IBIS, use the XH2S's 5.7 million dot EVF with high magnification for those times when manual focus is the point, keep the body as small as possible, even if it means eliminating video altogether, so that things like thermal management is less of an issue, or a full-size HDMI port, and works with urgency to make their best lenses even smaller, even lighter, smoother, and faster to autofocus, I think Fujifilm just might have a phenomenal success on its hands. I suppose we'll see soon enough. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comment section below because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video call via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.